Okay, so for the topic of the next session, it is shaping Singapore through urban design, and we do have Miss Siew Leng here with us.
Sawadika. Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, my sincere thanks to Ms. Korakot, the President of ACT Forum, and Assistant Professor Comrade, for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to be the keynote speaker at this forum. It is indeed an honor to be here in Bangkok, representing the Urban Redevelopment Authority of Singapore. I will start by sharing on our approach on urban design and how it has shaped the physical landscape of Singapore, as well as what it means for our urban life. I will round up with how urban design has evolved to meet the new challenges confronting us, using the recently completed master plan for Marina South to illustrate that. I hope that my sharing this afternoon will provide you with some insights on how the practice of urban design will continue to evolve over time, and I certainly welcome a discussion following that. But first, a short introduction. The Urban Redevelopment Authority of Singapore is Singapore's national land use planning and conservation authority. And our mission is quite simply to make Singapore a great city to live, work, and play. At the URA, we undertake land use planning, urban design, and development control work. We also coordinate infrastructure planning and promote the conservation of our built heritage. Within URA, we also have a design and planning lab, which is a very recent setup to leverage on technology, on digital technology. So I will share a little bit on that later on how it has helped in our planning and urban design work. And to facilitate the implementation of our plans, state land is released for development through what we call the Government Land Sales or GLS program, which I will also make some reference to later on. We also carry out place management of key areas in Singapore, such as at Marina Bay, and we also promote architecture and urban design excellence. To give a context, Singapore is a small island with a land area about 730 square kilometers, which is about half the size of Bangkok City. And as you can appreciate, the combination of land scarcity and lack of natural resources remains a key existential challenge for us as planners. Our population is now at 5.6 million, which results in a population density slightly higher than that of Bangkok's. Singapore is unique from other cities because we are both a city and a country. Within our very limited land area, we have to accommodate the many functions of a city, such as housing, commerce, and industry, as well as the needs of a country, such as airports, seaports, defense, and water catchment areas. In order to meet the needs of the city-state, prudent planning for sustainable growth has been a necessity for Singapore from day one. We need to make sure that we balance across economic, social, and environmental considerations, and that our plans are flexible, resilient, and inclusive. Our plans are guided by a systematic planning and development system which comprises 4 key components. There is the integrated long-term planning process and master plan, which are the plan-making components. There is also government land sales and development control, which help us to transfer our plans to reality. Urban design is done at the level of the master plan to help translate our long-term vision into implementable plans and policies. To optimize its land and airspace, Singapore has to build denser and taller. Therefore, urban design is important to ensure that the living environment continue to remain attractive and offers a high quality of life. There are 3 broad aspects that we consider in bringing our plans to reality. Urban design is a highly contextual discipline, and urban design interventions can only be successful when they address the specific local needs and issues. Our planners and urban designers strive to adopt a human-centric approach in our work, as ultimately we are designing for people. To implement our plans, we have to leverage the use of policies and planning levers, which I also will discuss later on. We aspire for Singapore to be a distinctive, dynamic, and delightful city. Hence, we seek to achieve these outcomes through urban design that operates at the macro, meso, and micro scales, from sculpting skylines to streetscapes and public spaces. At the macro scale, urban design covers the structure of a city, such as transport planning, land use zoning, development intensity, infrastructure network, and understanding the character of its various districts. We have developed city-wide structure plans over the years, which serve as the guiding framework for URA's urban design work. They highlight how each district in the city can have its own distinctive character based on its geographic, natural, and heritage assets. One of the most significant plans guiding Singapore's urban design is the seminal Central Area Structure Plan done in 1985. It was a comprehensive long-term plan for the Central Area that remains relevant today. The structure plan sets out in a clear hierarchy to guide rapid development in the growing city. The plan proposes to retain the existing historical districts and features and to concentrate new developments within these intensive areas shown on the plan. Moving from the structure plan, the district character plan defines the various districts in the central area based on their predominant land use, positioning, and geographical context. Given that urban development of Singapore started in the city, urban planners and designers do not work on their plans and design from a clean slate or from tabula rasa. To illustrate the urban design plans and guidelines for Singapore River, one of the key districts in central area, take reference from the presence of the river and the low-rise conserved buildings flanking it by ensuring new developments are kept low-rise at the riverfront and taller buildings have to be set back 1 block away from the river. Another key plan is our conservation plan. As we continue to develop, we are also mindful that our built heritage is a valuable reminder of our history and roots. URA's conservation plan identifies the areas with buildings with heritage value and ensures that new buildings or redevelopment within or near these areas will have to complement the existing conserved buildings. This plan has allowed Singapore to remain distinctive with our own identity. To date, we have conserved more than 7,200 buildings. Many of these are in entire districts like Chinatown, Boat Quay, Kampong Glam, and Little India. The Landmark and Gateway Plan identifies landmark and gateway sites derived from the key approaches into the city center and key sites which serve as markers in the city center. These sites will require high-quality architectural design befitting its location as well as special urban design considerations. Establishing sight lines and vistas are helpful for curating activity spines, scenic views, and skylines. For example, when arriving into the city from Changi Airport along a lushly planted tree-lined boulevard, one is greeted with an unblocked view of the CBD with its skyscrapers set against Marina Bay. At the meso scale, urban design focuses on the form of developments and building heights to achieve a distinctive urban identity. As urban designers, we organize building forms and building heights to sculpt the skyline to shape the physical character of the area. In this example here at Marina Bay, lower heights are planned around the bay to create a comfortable human-scale waterfront experience, while higher heights are set back further to allow landmark sites to stand out as markers in the city. The variation of building heights creates a step, layered, and three-dimensional city skyline. It also maximizes view to the buildings as well as from the buildings to the bay. Seen as a whole, we get a signature skyline that we hope is a distinctive feature of Singapore. This is the view of the existing CBD when viewed from the Singapore River near Boat Quay. In this view, one can enjoy a unique juxtaposition of the old and the new. By retaining our built heritage, even as we continue to develop, we get an extremely unique site-specific skyline that brings together the new and the old, and that is impossible to replicate elsewhere. Our natural features are treated as precious assets. We capitalize on our green and blue assets to give our city breathing space. Our water bodies provide attractive spaces for staging and enjoying water activities, even as they function as reservoirs, in this case here, and in many other places where we have been damming up our rivers to act as reservoirs. They also help to enhance the sense of islandness to our city. Night lighting plays a very important role in defining the skyline of the city in the evening. We have a night lighting plan that has differentiated guidelines for the various districts in the city to bring out each of the distinctive character of these districts. Here in Marina Bay, coordinated night lighting conveys density and activity. The lighting is curated to be subtle and contemporary in character. This amplifies Singapore's image as a cosmopolitan metropolis, which is befitting of its status as one of the world's financial hubs. The lighting is focused on the building crowns to draw our eye upwards, allowing us to appreciate the city skyline. Meanwhile, in the civic district, the focus is slightly different, where night lighting is used as a means of creating harmony and repose. Lighting is used to highlight the critical mass of historical monuments and used to grant them a sense of dignity and grandeur. The roof is an integral part of the form of individual buildings, but when seen together as a whole, the roofscape of buildings can provide a unifying character for the district. For example, clay tiled pitch roofs are required for new buildings along Singapore River. This allows new buildings to contribute to the historic river's coherent identity, blending in with the terracotta tiled pitch roof of conserved warehouses and shophouses here. The roof in many situations becomes the building's fifth elevation. For example, the Esplanade Theatre is designed to be viewed from above as it is surrounded by much taller buildings. Roofs can also double as attractive communal spaces. Rooftop gardens at Funan, seen here in the center picture, provide space for urban farms and events. Our urban design guidelines incentivizes the developer to design the roof as a usable space by giving additional gross floor area for outdoor dining, and we do exempt the rooftop garden from what we call the gross floor area computation. At the Marina Bay Sands Sky Park and Infinity Pool, its rooftop provides great views of the city and doubles up as places to wine, dine, and party. In all these examples, we have screening requirements for rooftop M&E services so that they do not mar our skyline. At the micro scale, we consider the spatial experience at the street level and the human scale, which can be defined by building edges, facade treatment, and street fronting uses, including outdoor dining, public art, landscaping, and lighting. We strive to create streets that stir our senses as it makes our experiences of a city so much richer and more memorable. Active, vibrant streetscapes are integral to designing for a dynamic city. An important element in a street for Singapore is the covered walkway, which has become an essential part of our city's pedestrian network. This isn't really a new invention, as car walkways have been around since colonial times as part of the shophouse typology known as a 5-foot way. Today, all commercial buildings along major routes in the central area are required to provide covered walkways, which are much needed in our hot and humid climate. By making our streets more workable, we also facilitate the adoption of public transport, which is very much needed in Singapore, as we cannot afford to continue to set aside more land for roads. Working together with car walkways are through block links, which serves as shortcuts to buildings and increases the permeability of the area at the ground level. Through block links also allow for visual connectivity. For example, here at 1 Fullerton, we have a true block link that doubles up as a view corridor to the bay. We plan for active users, such as retail, food and beverage outlets, with direct access along main pedestrian routes to ensure the vibrancy of these streets. Active users, particularly on the first story of developments, are a mandatory requirement for developments along the key activity corridors, as shown in the earlier slide on the structure plan of the city. For example, we would require active users along both sides of Orchard Road, which is Singapore's main shopping street. To complement these active users, outdoor refreshment areas are encouraged to front streets, promenades, and pedestrian malls. Outdoor refreshment areas add visual interest at the eye level, and which is also important to engage with pedestrians. Most importantly, of course, dining outdoors is a way of life for us in Singapore because people just love eating outdoors. And given that all our MRT stations in the city centre are underground stations, we have also planned for an underground pedestrian network, or UPN for short. The UPN acts as a major pedestrian mover system in the city centre where the density is high, and this complements the street-level pedestrian network. And of course, everybody loves the UPN because it provides all-weather protection for us. Public space is one of the important elements that makes the city delightful and livable, and we strive to make these places friendly and accessible for everyone to enjoy. In the planning of an area, the most critical part for urban designer is how to plan for the people. Marina Bay is planned as a people's bay. We wanted to ensure that the most attractive parts of the bay are publicly accessible to all and at all times. Here's another view of Marina Bay from above. At the heart of Marina Bay is a continuous 3.5 kilometer long waterfront promenade, which links many sites of interest together to form a necklace of attractions around the bay. The boardwalk around Marina Bay takes advantage of the universal appeal of water and enhances the urban relationship with water by bringing people closer to the water. In land-scarce Singapore, we have to create new space through the concept of co-location. An example here is at Marina Barrage, originally designed as a functional standalone pump room for the barrage. We, as urban designers in the URA, seeded the idea for its rooftop to be transformed into a public space to complement the waterfront and the park, the gardens by the bay adjacent to it. And it never, in our wildest imagination, where we seeded an idea that when it was completed, it was so very, very popular with the public who come here to fly kites and to have a picnic. The European typology of piazzas and plazas is not really suited for our climate. In a hot and humid climate like ours, it is important that we provide public spaces that are comfortable for people to gather and linger. So we will have to make sure that these public spaces are well shaded. And these spaces function as what we call living rooms of the city. And they are very important venues that are sheltered from the elements. We are always looking for opportunities to bring in new users to activate the city. We have a program called RSVP, or Reinventing Spaces into Vibrant Places, that allows us to tender out vacant state-owned buildings to bring more interesting users into the city. We invite the private sector to propose innovative ideas for these buildings that can bring in new activation. Their proposals should plug the gap in the offerings in that part of the city, and we evaluate the tender by giving higher emphasis to the quality of the proposal rather than just the tender price. And what is life without art? Public art is one way of breathing soul into our city. Public art in the city started with our art incentive scheme that was launched in 2005. In this scheme, we gave additional gross floor area for developers to provide public art in their development that is equal to the value of the artworks to encourage developers to incorporate this artwork. Over time, developers realized the value of investing in such public artworks, and they have started doing it even without our incentives. For example, this particular example was realized by the developers after the lapse of the incentive scheme, and this artwork is at Capitol Green, an installation of dense root-like columns that blurs the line between structure and nature. Storytelling is also an important part of bringing the history of our city to life. Sculptures along the Singapore River Promenade help us recall the former activities and way of life along the river. And what happens when the street is temporarily disrupted due to construction activities? Not very different from here in Bangkok, where you also have very nice examples. Here at Ophir Road, there is a massive underground road that's being built. And instead of leaving the blank hoardings as they were, we saw this as an opportunity to soften the impact of the construction and to celebrate the artists in our community. Hence, our creative hoarding program that was supported by the Lively Places Fund, administered by the URA, allowed these hoardings to become a canvas for the community and to showcase its unique street art culture. I have just spoken about our urban design aspirations and strategies, but equally important is how can we get them implemented? What is our palette of tools, policies, and levers that allows us to translate our plans into reality? We are fortunate that our government owns more than 80% of our total land area. We release state land by tender for the private sector to undertake the development through the government land sales program. Being the land sales agent for the government, it's been instrumental in allowing URA to translate its plans into reality. When a land parcel is launched for sale, URA will prepare the technical conditions of tender, which includes all the urban design requirements that the successful tenderer must adhere to. In this example, the Capitol Theatre is one such sale site where we require the development to turn a former unattractive service lane in a very historical development site into a galleria, flanked by shops and restaurants, thereby creating a new destination in the city. Similarly, in Orchard Road, when we sold two adjacent sites next to an open canal, we required the open canal to be decked over and to be flanked with active users. Today, the canal has become what we call the Discovery Walk, and if you have been to Orchard Road, this is in the Somerset area. It's a great example of successful urban rejuvenation where infrastructure space is transformed into a lively, well-used pedestrian mall. And how do we go about procuring high-quality developments with innovative concepts? For strategic sites in the city, such as the South Beach development at Beach Road that was designed by Norman Foster and Aders and developed by CDL, we use a concept and price revenue tender approach. At the first stage of the tender process, the concept proposals that have substantially satisfied the evaluation criteria would be shortlisted. Then next, we will open the price envelope and of only the shortlisted concept proposals. The site would then be awarded to the tenderer with the highest bid among the shortlisted proposals. Even if you have not visited Singapore before, I'm sure you will recognize this building from the Crazy Rich Asian movie. The Marina Bay Sands Integrated Resort was realized through a fixed price tender. Normally, all land sales in Singapore is tendered and awarded to the highest bidder. But in this case, we fixed the price and they had to compete on their concept proposals. We set the price then, back in November 2005, at 1.2 billion Singapore dollars. And in the end, Las Vegas Sands was awarded the rights for this site. And the key factors in the winning bid included the Art Science Museum, the big public space to stage events at the waterfront, and a 100,000 square meter of MICE facilities, and as well as the daring Sky Park observation deck that is perched 200 meters in the air. And of course, this is all a wonderful, iconic design by Mr. Moshi Safdie. In Singapore, for government projects, we adopt a price quality method to procure the services of design consultants by giving weightage to the quality of design concepts and their fee proposal. The float at Marina Bay will be redeveloped as the new NS Square with a permanent 30,000-seater stadium for national-scale events such as our National Day Parade and the SGP Formula One event. For this project, we used a quality fee method to procure the best design, where a strong emphasis was given to the quality of the design, and the design was awarded to none other than Mr. Wong Man Sam here. And in a few years' time, if you should visit Singapore, I'm sure you will appreciate how wonderful this new addition will be to our waterfront. For very strategic projects, we go for open design competitions to tap on a bigger talent pool for new ideas. What you see is a result of an international design competition where we invited architects to reimagine a new housing typology for the first 50-story public housing project that would provide a highly attractive super high-rise, super dense living environment. And this kind of competition is judged totally blind, to allow talented architects to have the opportunity to work on large-scale public projects that may otherwise not be available to them, especially when track records are required. And out of more than 200 design entries from all over the world, the entry Sky Houses Flying Green by a small local firm known as Arc Studio Architecture and Urbanism emerged as the winner. Other examples of open design competitions include Gardens by the Bay, which was designed by Grant Associates and Wilkinson Eyre Architects. Another one is the Founders Memorial by Kengo Kumar in collaboration with Singapore's architecture firm K2LD, and this is now being developed, and in another few years' time, by 2027, it will be completed and is located in Marina East, across from Gardens by the Bay in Marina South. You have seen this project, but we love to use this project, to illustrate my points. And URA, we develop policies to achieve development objectives. And one such example is the landscaping for urban spaces and high-rises, or we call it LUSH for short, where new developments and major A&A projects in key areas in the city center are required to replace 100% greenery within the development. The objective is, of course, to create more opportunities for users to be close to greenery, even as we build taller and denser. And Mansam has already spoken earlier on, greenery cools our buildings, lowers the ambient temperature. And, this is really, a way of us also creating our own architectural design for Singapore. And we have so many good examples that Mansa has shared, and I'll continue to show in the next slide. This large program has also allowed us to create rooftop community farms, as in this project by Mansam called the Kampung Admiralty, because the community farm can be used as part of the fulfillment for the greenery replacement requirement. I have talked about the importance of public spaces. So how exactly do we get developers to provide them? In the example of Asia Square shown here, the site area of these developments are very large due to the demand for large office floor plates at that time. So despite this, we wanted to ensure that the street level at the ground floor of the development, they must remain permeable so that pedestrians feel welcome and people walk through the buildings and not around the buildings. Asia Square here is an example where the public, what we call city room, was provided as part of the requirement when we sold the site. And these public spaces, although we require them, they are exempted from what we call gross floor area computation. So in effect, the developer will not lose any of their developer floor area. I mentioned about outdoor dining. To enliven our public spaces, we either carve out spaces for what we call temporary occupational license for outdoor dining, or we give the developer or the building owners additional gross floor area so that they are incentivized to provide outdoor dining that front key streets and public spaces. So I've been mainly talking about the hardware. But it's also important that we consider the software, which makes a city dynamic and delightful. Hence, placemaking has become an important part of enlivening our city. As the place manager for Marina Bay, we, URA, manages the public spaces around the bay. And we work with other agencies and the private sector to bring activities and events to the bay year-round. URA also organizes 2 key annual signature events with the objective of making Marina Bay a bay of celebration and the people's bay. Here we have I Light Singapore, which is an annual celebration that features artists from all the world using what we call sustainable light art installations. And please, I would like to invite all of you to Singapore on 1st of June, because we are staging the next edition, the 9th edition of our iLight Festival. You're all very, very welcome. It's free to public. Anybody can just kind of enjoy our city in the evening when it's really nice and cool. The other signature event at Marina Bay is the Marina Bay Singapore Countdown. We also encourage the private stakeholders to do more, to undertake place management and placemaking, so as to bring about more economic and social vibrancies to their own districts in a much more sustainable way. So we started the pilot business improvement district program in 2017, drawing inspiration from the UK and the US to encourage precincts to form BIDs to undertake place management and placemaking initiatives on their own. For the pilot phase, the Singapore government provides dollar-to-dollar matching funding to the bids, which raises their own funding through their membership to carry out the initiatives to promote their own districts, such as light-ups, events, festivals, festive bazaars, including installing more public seating and public artwork, and undertake promotional events for their district. The idea is that stakeholders know best what they need for their own precinct to bring benefits like footfall, longer dwell time, more spending, etc. BIDs also promote social cohesion and empower stakeholders to take greater ownership in shaping their own precincts. We think that this is a much more sustainable way, instead of government always having to organize events for every district, which is not easy. And in between the big events, what happens? So this is one way of making sure that the stakeholders can sustain their own precincts. I would like to round up by sharing on how urban design has evolved to meet the challenges of climate change energy crisis, social inequity, and stratification, as well as the opportunities afforded by new digital technologies. I would like to use the newly completed master plan for Marina South, a mixed-use residential neighborhood in Marina Bay, to illustrate my points. Marina South is an area of 60 hectares that sits in between the gardens by the bay and the southern coast of Singapore. It seeks to redefine city living as a forward-looking mixed-use neighborhood. Being a greenfield site on reclaimed land, Marina South presents a unique opportunity to champion sustainable living right from the start. Marina South is well connected to Marina Bay, the CBD, and the rest of Singapore via public transit and major roads. 2 MRT stations on the Thomson East Coast Line serve this area. It's planned as a car-light, what we call car-light district, that is self-sufficient neighborhood with amenities and recreational facilities within an easy 10-minute walk via leafy streets and dedicated cycling lanes. Car parking provision is half of the business as usual standard in this area. Focus is given to create a public realm that is convivial, one that creates opportunities for residents to meet serendipitously at street corners and pedestrian malls, or to partake in activities at a number of privately owned public spaces. There are 3 outcomes that are driving this new model for city living. First, a 10-minute neighborhood, a mixed-use residential neighborhood with retail, hotels, offices, amenities, and public transport, all within a 10-minute walk. Second, a green, blue, and cool urban oasis planned based on sustainability principles. The neighborhood, surrounded by gardens and water, supports eco-friendly lifestyles. Developers will be required to adopt sustainability-driven initiatives from the design stage onwards. Third, a community-centric neighborhood for all, a convivial public realm to support the building of socially resilient, multi-generational communities. Marina South has an extensive network of public spaces which are interconnected through walkable streets, mid-block shortcuts, covered walkways, underground pedestrian links, and elevated pedestrian walkway. The 800-meter-long pedestrian mall sitting above the MRT tunnel is the key spine that links these various networks together. The pedestrian mall is bookended by the MRT stations, and it is lined with active users like food courts, supermarkets, cafes, retail, service, and amenity shops. To keep the neighborhood lively, as shown here, developers will be encouraged to utilize building setbacks to design well-shaded informal community spaces incorporating street furniture and large landscaping. And to achieve a 10-minute neighborhood, the ground plane is kept porous to allow shortcuts, giving priority to how pedestrians walk. We therefore require through-block links or to link streets to streets through the development, so it's a fenceless kind of development. An underground pedestrian link located beneath the pedestrian mall will also ensure weather-protected connections between developments and the 2 MRT stations. And similarly, an elevated landscape walkway with lush planting, rest places, and rain shelters will provide a comfortable shady connection linking gardens by the bay to the north of this district to the south, which is the Marina South Coast. The building form and massing in Marina South are studied carefully to not only create good scale, well-defined streets and spaces, but also to optimize wind and shading given Singapore's climate. Optimizing wind flow and lowering ambient temperature is a collective effort and shared responsibility. Hence, we have adopted a courtyard typology with building blocks placed to create wind corridors to channel wind to key streets, public spaces, and residential blocks. No-build zones and wind corridors are guided to ensure that the predominant northeastern and southern winds are channeled through the district. This can help mitigate the urban heat island effect, encourage the use of natural ventilation, and reduce reliance on air conditioning. And we use the new digital tools to help us arrive at this. As energy consumption is one of the primary sources of carbon emissions in the development, increasing energy efficiency will go a long way in achieving better sustainability outcomes. Developers are required to adopt measures to achieve a higher standard of energy efficiency, reducing energy consumption and reaping significant cost savings over the long run. And they can achieve this by adopting measures such as tropical architecture with a focus on natural ventilation and minimizing solar heat gain. Developers will also be encouraged to adopt development-level centralized cooling and energy monitoring systems. They also need to provide EV charging points to facilitate the adoption of cleaner and greener forms of transport in their car parks. Reducing the carbon footprint of the precinct is a key priority in Marina South. All developments will need to achieve Green Mark super low energy platinum certification with maintainability, whole of life carbon, and health and well-being badges. This allows developments to achieve at least 60% energy savings compared to the 2005 building codes. Developers will also be encouraged to adopt sustainable waste management measures, such as implementing publicly accessible recycling collection points, composting facilities for food waste, water-sensitive urban design features, and development-level pneumatic waste conveyance system to ensure sanitary and odorless waste collection. Developers are required to provide landscape replacement area that's equivalent to the site area of the development. And to create a distinctive precinct identity and encourage biodiversity and sustainable greening, they are also encouraged to use native species of plants. Rooftop farming is also encouraged and counted towards fulfilling the landscape replacement areas requirement. And as Mansam has mentioned earlier on, they really serve to reduce solar heat gain to the developments and reduce our cooling load on the building. A key focus for Marina South is how to create a community-centric neighborhood where residents feel that their needs for services as well as for social interaction and community bonding are met. Developers are required to work with government agencies to provide facilities to cater to the needs of the community. And examples will include childcare centers, senior care facilities, and other multi-purpose community spaces. These amenities have to be located prominently, fronting public spaces and key streets to ensure convenient access to the users. Privately owned public spaces within these developments are planned as urban living rooms for everyday interactions and community activities. We will also encourage developers to design multi-generational public spaces with facilities to cater to the needs of users ranging from children to the elderly, such as locating playgrounds together with age-friendly fitness corners, fronting shops or cafes, allowing users of all ages to congregate. While there now exists many new technology and software tools, as you have seen how we help our planners and urban designers to arrive at optimal evidence-based design solutions, it is even more critical that we set clear long-term objectives that are centered on solid fundamentals. I wish to conclude my talk with 4 C's that we must adopt in our planning and urban design work. Contextual design response is very important. Community-centric for the people. Culturally appropriate responses. And ambitious climatic adaptation measures. This will allow us to achieve a sustainable, happy, and healthy living environment for all. Thank you very much for your patience. It's been a very long talk, but Kokum Kap.
Please give a big hand to Ms. Siew Leng, our keynote speaker. And before I invite our moderator on the stage, allow me to read to you his background briefly. So we have the president of Thai Urban Designer Association, who's from the Department of Urban and Regional Planning, Faculty of Architecture, Chulalongkorn University, and he is also the assistant president from Chulalongkorn University. And ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Assistant Professor Prin Jiaramani Chochai, PhD, on the stage.
Hello, good afternoon. Firstly, I would like to thank you, Kun Fan Siew Leng, Chief Urban Designer of URA, for wonderful works of the key projects and for planning, designing and acting of Singapore, which is the world leading urban development. Your last slide, your conclusion, make me thinking about the future of urban development in Thailand, because you mentioned about the 4 that we have to do, but the first 3 is very challenging. They are very, very challenging of contextual considering, and also culture and community, which at the moment, I think this is very important issue for making the city livable. And fortunately, that in this hall, we have not only the urban designer, but also architects that your presentation inspired a lot, their way of thinking and also the way they work in the future. I would like to firstly ask for the question from the audience, and if there is no question, I will do that job. Okay. So I will ask for the questions from the stage. And if you have any question, you just raise your hand and I will pick you up to ask the question. And also the question can be asked in English and also in Thai. Okay? Okay, please introduce yourself first.
My name is Ko Chong. I'm working for the public sector. I would like to ask the incentive for the public art for the private investor. What kind of the incentive and is detailed? Is it compulsory to design guideline or design control for the URA to private sector? Public art.
On the art, is it? The art incentive scheme. Okay. They are not required to put art in the developments, but at that point of time, we thought that what we can do is to encourage developers to provide public artwork, and therefore the incentive scheme came about. So for the artwork, the value, we convert that equivalent value in terms of GFA, gross floor area. So assuming, I don't know, if they put an artwork of $1 million, maybe they can get 1,000 square meters of GFA, for example, you know. And that incentivized the developers to provide a lot of artwork. And one of the example is, if you've been to Marina Bay Sands, it has the biggest artwork on the facade that is used to screen their district cooling system using pieces of aluminum, and then it's hung on a mesh, and when the wind blows, you know, this thing, you know, is dynamic and, you know, very, very fascinating. It's done by this artist called Ned Khan from the US. And Marina Bay Sands, I think they were very excited with our incentives, so they spent a lot of money on the artwork and creating so this is one of the very big one. And then there's another one in the plaza in front of the bay. It's a huge, like a bowl, you know, it's a perspex bowl, like a glass bowl. And water will come and flush down and then go into the basement. And if you're sitting in the basement around there having tea, you suddenly have a waterfall. So it's also a artwork. So it did encourage developers to provide, but over time, actually, nowadays, we already stopped the scheme. We noticed that the developers were already acquiring artwork on their own and putting into the developments because I think they start to realize the benefits already.
Okay. Next question. Okay.
Ms. Fan, sorry I missed the early part of your presentation, but I wonder if you have already talked about your URA working system and the structure of your organization. How do you implement good designs? Do you have your own designers? Do you hire outside consultants? Or you have any way to really put up so good work that we have seen at Marina Bay area? Yes, thank you.
Okay, planning and urban design work is done mainly within the URA. Okay, we have trained architects and urban designers. We do the urban design work. So we lay the foundation in the sense of how we want to organize developments in, say, Marina Bay area. Where are the low-rise buildings, where the high-rise building, how you scout the skyline, how you ensure access to public spaces at the ground level, where we plan to have a necklace of attractions around the bay with a publicly accessible promenade at all times for all people. And then we make sure that developments along the promenade area, the waterfront, we have like the theaters by the bay, we have the Art Science Museum. These are publicly accessible and attractions, right? So that, in fact, this is the best part of the bay, and we want to make sure that the public has access to that part. So these are the kind of things we do in setting the urban design framework. Then we say that how do we make sure that the developments that come up in the area are of good, high architectural quality. I did talk, maybe you missed it, for Marina Bay Sands, it was, you have seen the design, and I assume you like it, okay? And how did we get such an iconic design? Is because of the way we tender the land, okay? So first of all, when we tender any piece of land, the urban design requirements are put into the sales package. So it's made very clear. So for example, in Marina Bay Sands, it's a very big development. It covers at least 60% of the waterfront on that side of the bay. And we didn't want the development to therefore create like a wall, you know, and make it impermeable for people because it's a connection between the street and the waterfront. And so we insisted on, I think, 2 or 3 view corridors and through block links to the building. So if you are on one side of the street, you actually can look through the building, you can see the bay, the water, you can see our civic district with all the monuments, you know, in front. And that is to create visual connectivity and all that. And then we put in a requirement like you need to have a public attraction, okay? You need to have 100,000 square meters of something, for example, a public space. Then you have to have a public attraction at the rooftop, for example. We can put in all these conditions. And then for Marina Bay Sands, we fixed the price of the land, which is very unusual. It's unprecedented. It's the first time. Normally, we sell land and we look at the tender bid. The highest will win. But in this case, Marina Bay Sands, as you know, we call it integrated resort, but actually it's an integrated development, but actually there's a casino component. So we say that they have to, whoever puts up the proposal must convince us that it's bringing us a lot of other external benefits as well. It's not just about the casino. So therefore, we fix the price and the proposals have to come in to convince us with the best concept proposal. And of course, all the bidders were then getting all the best architectural teams together to then try to win the bid. And in our assessment, in the end, we gave it to Marina Bay, Las Vegas Sands. Does that answer your question? Yeah, thank you.
Okay. From your presentation, I wonder how URA creates many initiatives and also measures that can be applicable to and implement. Comparing to Thailand, we have only two measures. One is the comprehensive plan, the zoning, and the second one is only the building code. So this is like the interesting issue for architects, not only for urban designer but also for architect and other designer to think about how we have the common understanding of our shared resources. I am very impressive, and when you mentioned about the method of tender, that is quite challenging in terms of not only considering the highest price, but the quality of the space to give to the people. I think this is a thing that we have to put forward, and maybe we can learn from Singapore. Yes, thank you. And yes, another question. I cannot see you because, you, please raise your hand. Okay.
Hi, thank you for your presentation, Madame Fan. I have two questions regarding to the roles of the URA. Of course, your organization is one of the most progressive offices in urban design in the world. The first question is that from your successful project that you showed to us, URA has a very important role, not only to direct, to control, but also to negotiate. I would like to know what is the key success or the most important thing when you try to convince all the stakeholders in the city to buy in your measures and also initiatives and plan. This is the first question. And the second question, a few years ago I visited URA Gallery, and what I realized that Singaporeans have a very good urban literacy. I saw there's a kind of it's like activity by the school students, like I'm not sure, like junior high school. They were working on city skyline. This is what we practice in the Department of Urban Design in the undergrad school, not elementary school. So no wonder, okay, you got a lot of support from your people when you propose quite advanced idea, like you showed to us. So I would like to know, what is the role of a URA in implanting all this urban literacy in your populations? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, we realized very early on that URA has to engage with all our stakeholders, from young to old, from the public to the professionals to the developers. because development involves everybody. From beginning to the end, there are so many stakeholders to carry through a project. And we even start with, like you said, children in school, some even in primary school, and then maybe secondary school and junior college, including, of course, the higher institute of learning. So for example, why do we even start with young children? Because our ulterior motive is to get them interested in a career with architecture and planning and urban design. And we actually have some success story that, in fact, one of our group directors, when he was young, he came and took part in one of our program, similar to what we call today CUBE, where we get the high school students to come in groups, and then we give them an area and say, let's say Chinatown, okay, make some proposals, how to make Chinatown better, or, things like that, culturally vibrant. And he was so impressed. And then we show them we have a model making team in URA. And, as young children, they love to make models. So they were so fascinated because the model makers would teach them how to put models together. And it's this kind of activities, in the beginning, you think that, yeah, really, does this mean anything, But, it's trying to get them to appreciate it. And then eventually people will take up this profession. Because our profession needs people with passion. We all know here, it's all hard work, right? Really hard work. We slog. Then we have to convince people, with our wonderful ideas. Like Mansam says, sometimes 50-50, sometimes you win, sometimes you don't win. But the passion carries us through, I think, yeah, you have to have the kind of passion and perseverance to be in our profession. Otherwise, we can't wake up tomorrow already. Every day we want to wake up and we are raring to go because we are passionate about our city. And so we start with young people. And then we also work with our professional institutes, like our Singapore Institute of Architects and Planners, and including our Real Estate Developers Association. So we do give them consultancy. So for example, about 2 years ago, when we were doing our long-term plan review, we asked Singapore Institute of Architects and Planners to come together to put 2 proposals for us for Pai Leba, which is today military airport, which we can relocate away and open up this area, which is like, I think, 5 times the size of Marina Bay. So it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity, for them to showcase their ideas for Singapore. And this is a way of also engaging them and for them to share their ideas, wonderful ideas, so that we also learn from them. Because it's a to and fro, nobody has a monopoly on good ideas. And so that's how we engage with the professionals as well. And the dialogue that carries on, right, in this whole process of the consultancy, that's where they understand where we are coming from because we give them the brief, then they give us proposal, then we go back to them and say, this cannot make it, or something like that, and explain what our considerations and all that. And that's how you also build up that kind of understanding and appreciation of the kind of constraint we face. It's always very easy to say, for example, an issue on heritage. Heritage, we also engage the interest groups. The heritage groups will always say, you must keep all these buildings. All have history, of course, everyone has history. And all of us have some kind of memories of these buildings or that space or that structure. In the end, we have to always engage them and tell them about our constraint, which I think I shared just now. We are very, very land scarce. And we want to continue to grow. We want to continue to have a good quality of life. We want to have good jobs. All these need land. We want to be water self-sufficient. We eventually may have to be energy, efficient. I don't know. All these need land. And can you keep all the buildings? I think it's difficult. Then can we do a more scientific way, for example, to study across the whole range of, say, our built heritage, and then we rank them. And how do we still piece together a sufficiently robust and comprehensive story of our city by keeping some of these buildings? And then those that we cannot keep, are there ways to continue to create memories of them by documenting them, or storyboards, walking trails, things like that. And that is the kind of conversation we always have. And so that we bring them aboard to understand. We are actually converted. All of us in URA also wants to conserve. You know, we are the conservation authority, you know. And I have a very, very passionate team of architects and urban designers working on conservation. They are conservationists at heart. So it's a struggle that we have, you know, all the time, and we share that with them. I think it's always easier to bring people on board. So similarly with real estate developers, they have to make money, of course. It's a business, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. But we have to share our plans with them to tell them the vision that, you know, we have, and it's going to be a better future for everybody if we can develop in a certain, more sustainable way. For example, how we can make Singapore, you know, the public spaces more equitable to everybody, more accessible. They understand all these things. And then we use the carrot and stick. Carrot meaning that we incentivize them. If you provide this, we're not going to count that as a gross floor area. It's exempted, so you won't lose any of the buildable, rentable, lettable space, right? The stick is, when we sell land, we put as a requirement. We make it known upfront to them, we want this facility, for example, and you have to provide it. And they will take that into consideration in the pricing of the land when they tender for it. So we make it very transparent. And I think they are quite happy with that, because they all want to tender based on a level playing field. So that's important as well. So having very transparent plans. Just to let you know, our master plan is on the website. Anybody can go and look at it. Every plot of land will have the land use and the intensity marked on the plan. So if you own a piece of land, you know exactly what it can be used for. So there's no sort of gray areas in that sense. So making it transparent is important. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Please.
My name is Namchai Sansupa from Thai Association of Landscape Architects. I look at I'm envious seeing all the good measures implemented automatically and transparently to the government land sales, like automatically implemented there. And how about the private land? Are these measures equally implemented, and how?
So for private land, we have all our urban design guidelines published as well. So when they appoint an architect, the architect will, you know, refer to all these guidelines and then make a proposal to us to comply. For example, if we require even private land, if they redevelop to have a public space, we will have marked it on a plan. So we have many layers of urban design plans that are published. So it's transparent. Having said that, in more recent years, we were trying to encourage older office development in the CBD to redevelop to become more mixed use. Because as you know, the whole world is changing, and it's accelerated by the pandemic. Less and less people are also going back to office, and the CBD was really dead, during pandemic. Even before pandemic, after office hours, it's already quite dead, right? And weekend, of course, is very quiet because it's mono use. So we don't want that. We want to be more mixed use to make a CBD much more lively and inclusive. And so what we did is we had an incentive scheme to encourage developers of privately owned buildings, old buildings, especially office, to come in to redevelop, and we give them an incentive scheme, and this is all published as well. If you come in to do it, you get, for example, 25% extra gross floor area. If you convert a office building into, say, a mixed use with, say, residential and some commercial users. So this is another way of incentive because we don't have a hold over them. They have to decide when they want to develop. But you have to use an incentive to sort of accelerate that transformation of the CBD.
Thank you. And another question? Okay, please.
Yes, Ms. Fan, I have questions more to ask you. Well, URA has come a long way. I had seen a report of URA in the 60s, and I think URA is the key of the success of Singapore urban development. I have 2 questions to ask you. First is that how URA works with the government, any involvement from the politicians that will say interfere with the work of URA, because normally city planning or urban development will always have interference from politicians in other countries. I don't know in Singapore. The second question is the organization of URA. What is the composition of the teamwork at URA? For example, like how many urban designers that you have, architects, sociologists, economists, and even ecologists. Do you have all these disciplines of professional in your organization? The third question is that the conservation that you mentioned earlier. I understand that URA at the beginning was to demolish the communities to pave way for the new development, just like in China earlier. But now Singapore is more sensitive on the demolition of the old buildings or the old architecture. So what is the policy now of URA in trying to conserve the, history of Singapore for Singaporeans and for the younger generations to come?
Okay, I will answer in reverse order with the last question since it's fresh in our minds about conservation. In the early days of nation building after independence, there was an urgent need for us to clean up the city center because, you know, as far back as in early 80s, from what I understood, although I've never seen it personally, there was still night soil removers in Chinatown. Chinatown was not sewered, you know, even in the early 80s. So it was a slum. Because during the colonial days, they didn't provide enough housing for the people. And everybody had to squeeze into all the little shop houses in Chinatown and the other areas in the city center. In one shop house, it was documented that at one time, 100 people were staying in one of these shop houses. Amazing. And how do they do it? They rent the beds by day and then by night. There's a shift because the person goes to work and then somebody comes and sleep. And it was the terrible, terrible situation. And so we needed to clean that up. And so we had to not just chase people away, but to build public housing out of the city center first, to provide an alternative for them, so we resettled them there. And then we were supposed to demolish actually a lot of the shop houses in Chinatown. But luckily, URA managed to put up a convincing argument to keep this built heritage in Chinatown that is so important to our identity, our history. And at that point, we were able to make the argument because we had managed to reclaim some land to the south of the CBD. And we say that this land, even though it's not needed now, we have reclaimed, that will be the land safeguarded for future growth of the city. And then the political masters were convinced to say that, okay, then we have a way out, we can keep those shop houses. And so Chinatown is conserved in entire district. It's one of the historic core areas. So back then, we already were, as planners in URA, we are conservationists at heart. But we have to ensure that, you know, the needs of the nation are met. of course, over time, but that time when we conserve, not many people believe in conservation, okay? People say, why are you keeping all these old broken down shop houses? And we in URA had to undertake restoration to showcase as example of how you can do conservation. How do you restore these broken old buildings? And then people start to say, okay, I can see the value. That time, one shop house was selling for 150,000 Singapore dollars. Now it's fetching $10 million. Okay, so now people are educated already of the value, and it's really not just monetary value, but understanding our own culture and history. So the young people nowadays also are much more aware of the need for conservation. Then now this is the dialogue between them and us on how much to keep, how much more. We have kept quite a fair bit of the colonial buildings, the pre-war, post-war. Now the conversation is on the modern buildings. Recently we had a success story. We are very proud of it. It's the Golden Mile Complex. In Singapore, unfortunately, it's known as Little Thailand. Okay, because there were a lot of Thai restaurants, Thai businesses, Thai food stuff and things like that, and in a way, very beloved by the community. But the owners had not kept the building in good condition. So it's about 40 years old, and the lifts were not working, things were not, paint, concrete spoiling and things like that. And the owners wanted to sell. It's all individual owners, strata subdivided. And then we say, hold your horses. We are studying for conservation. They were very angry with us, very, very angry. Because they want to sell, and they sell at a good price. And this was their retirement fund for some of the owners. So we work out a package of, also again, an unprecedented package of incentives. They wanted to sell for, I think, 800 million. We thought was a bit ambitious, but that was the price they wanted. So we work out a package of incentives that allow them to build another about 30-story high residential block if they conserve, and they have to conserve the Golden Mile complex, okay? And then next to it, they have a car park block they can demolish and can put a 30-story building. And we gave them some, what we call land enhancement charges discount as well. Because when they put in additional GFA, they have to pay land betterment charge. We gave them a discount. And then, I wouldn't say they're happy, but okay, they went along with it because I think, okay, what can they do? The building is so old already. And there was a lot of support for the building to be kept. It's recognized as a very good example of architecture by our local architects during our nation building period. It was, the bravado period, where we say we can do things, And this was a very interesting building, the metabolist kind of concept building that I think at that point of time, even Professor Fumihiko Maki said to us and say, we have been talking about metabolism in Japan, but you have gone ahead to build it. So it was quite a happy story. And there were a lot of support from the general public, including especially young people, asking us to conserve the building. So we managed to do it.
Okay, the second question is about the organizational structure of URA.
Yes. Yes. It's never versus. It's always together.
No, not versus, in the way that how URA work with the government.
I understand. Well, first of all, we report to the Minister of National Development, and he's a politician. He has to win the election first. Then, he's appointed the minister, and we report to the Minister of National Development. We are very lucky in Singapore to have a stable government. As you know, the PAP has been in power since 50 years ago, since independence. And when the government is very stable, they are able to think long term. We don't think short term. And when we do things like the long term plan or the concept plan, we're talking about 50 years. Okay? The Ministry of National Development is very involved in those kind of plan making because we will always have to brief them, like to get them the support. And in fact, I will tell you, they push us to think in a very long-term, sustainable manner because their interest is Singapore's longevity and prosperity. So we work very closely with the politician in this sense. And then the other question is the structure of URA. Our planners come from all kinds of background, economics, sociologists, architects, urban designers, economists, yes. But we also work across all the other agencies, the economic agencies as well as the social agencies. Our chief planner chairs a committee called the Master Plan Committee, where all major plans have to be tabled at this committee, and the committee with all the relevant agencies at the table will have to debate about it and ask for the plan to be amended if it's needed before it's put up to the Minister of National Development for endorsement, before the project can proceed. So we work across with all the other agencies, what we all like to call the whole of government effort.
Well, I asked roughly that how many urban designers and architects and landscape architects you have in URA?
Architects, I think we have about 50. And most of that, first of all, we take in architects because we need architects to do urban design work. Because not many of us are trained as urban designers. Not many of us have a second degree in urban design. So our architects come in and they learn on the job. So I always say the URA is the graduate school of urban design for Singapore. Yes. Yes.
Okay, we have 6 minutes left. So maybe the last question. Okay, please.
Actually, we admire that Singapore is quite advanced in terms of urban planning system and the way you manage it from the top-down approach. But we hardly hear about the bottom-up approach. How can you increase participatory urban planning process in your mind? Second question is, what can you foresee for the challenge in the new decades that Singapore gonna face with?
Thank you for that question. Yes, we actually do a lot of engagement with the public. I forgot to mention just now. I alluded to it, but I didn't elaborate. Like for example, the long-term plan review that we just recently completed. It was a whole year long of engagement with the people. I think 15,000 people were engaged in either through workshops, discussion, talks, workshops, public surveys and polling to ask them about the kind of issues that we're facing and what kind of solutions and what kind of future they see for Singapore. And we got a lot of consensus for a lot of the things that we were going to do, which is very heartening. And with that kind of very broad-based support, we were then able to put up a final report on our long-term plan strategies moving forward. And with that completed, now we are actually in the midst of translating them in the master plan review to ensure that those strategies that we have highlighted in the long-term plan report will be carried through for the more immediate implementation for the next 10 to 15 years through the master plan. The other question is on
The other question is on the challenge that you can foresee in the Singapore going to face in the next decades.
You mean the challenges, is it? I think the challenges, I've highlighted some are constant for Singapore, like land scarcity, water self-sufficiency, and I think eventually already coming to us is energy. That will be an issue. But also societal changes. I think I came here and I noticed Thailand is a very young country. You have a lot of young, not young country, I mean you have a lot of young people. And I think that's augurs very well for all of you. I see that Thailand is going to be very prosperous, growing with a lot of young energy. But Singapore is an Asian society. In another how many years' time, every 2 out of 5 will be 65 and above. And that is something that we have to work very hard now to address the demographic shifts. How to keep older people engaged productively, even as they so-called retire from full-time work, for example, that's one thing. How about healthcare? That's something we have to grapple with. And housing. Housing for elderly, because it's different. We need assisted living, for example, looking at various kind of options for housing of the elderly as their needs evolve and change. The other societal change is young people not living with the family and wanting to live on their own and creating a lot of pressure on the need for more housing in Singapore. So I don't know if you follow news of Singapore property. We are facing a housing crunch now. Property prices are going up. Government just announced another slew of cooling measures. And that's partly because of the COVID, where the housing supply was disrupted, you know. We had to put off construction, right? We just couldn't do any construction. And now it's slowly picking up. But, you know, everybody's facing labor shortage. I don't know what happened to all the people who work. They don't seem to need to work anymore. They're not coming back. And then, of course, the war in Ukraine, and that also created a lot of pressure on resources. And then the young people start to say they want to move out and stay and, you know, and they also want more space now. And then the COVID says that we have to work at home, so that small flat is not good enough. So everybody's branching out and created a lot of demand for housing. So that's something that's more immediate that Singapore is facing, and we have to address it. Longer term, I think we should always be worried about fractures in society. As you know, we are very multicultural, multi-religious, multiracial, and we are very proud that we live harmoniously together, but fractures can happen if you don't keep an eye on things. And I think as urban designer or planner, I think the way we plan, I think we hope to address some of this. Of course, it's very multifaceted, and there are other things that you need to do, other social considerations, but that's some of the things that we need to look out for.
Okay, thank you. We finished on time.